guys, without any unnecessarily long introductions, this is a Cinderella story part 2. If you haven't seen part 1 and why I'm doing it, click on the video above me here on the eye. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment down below and subscribe so you don't miss out on part 3, the final installment. Wow, this is going to be good. Without further ado, enjoy! For months, Cinderella lived through her stepfamily's cruelty, enduring their cruel jokes and torments. But no matter how hard they pushed or how mean they could be, Cinderella remembered her mother's words and laughed through it all. And then one day a message went out through the land that the prince was having a ball, and all were invited. Cinderella desperately begged her stepmother to help her attend the ball, but her response was as cold as a winter's night. "How on earth do you expect to go to the ball? Do you think I, a respectable, elegant young woman, should carry you on my back the whole night? And honestly, darling, why would anyone want to see a dirty, disgusting, disfigured thing like you at the royal palace? I mean, it would be an absolute abomination to even think about letting you out of this cellar. No, you're going to stay here, right where you belong." After her stepmother and stepsisters left that night, Cinderella cried bitterly and wished with all her heart that she could go to the ball. "And go to the ball you shall." Cinderella was startled by the voice and spun in the direction she thought she heard it. She was greeted by a beautiful, glowing, winged figure, small enough to fit in the palm of her hands, dressed in white and shining like 1,000 diamonds as the light from the fireplace reflected off her dress. "Who are you?" Cinderella asked. "I, my dear, am your fairy godmother." "My what?" "Your fairy godmother." "What?" "Your fairy godmother. My..." "Look, kid, we could do this all day, but basically you made a wish, I appeared, and now you get to go to the ball." "But I can't." "How?" Cinderella said. "Look, do you want to go to the ball or not?" "Yes, but..." "Then watch this." Suddenly, the fairy whizzed around and around Cinderella, sprinkling her with a glittery dust, and her raggedy clothes were transformed into a beautiful, long, pastel blue dress. "It's beautiful, but you see," Cinderella began. "Look behind you." In the corner of the room lay a strange contraption. It was a small wooden seat with 2 small wheels at the front and 2 larger wheels at the back. "What is it?" Cinderella asked. "Well, my mate was doing some time travel on his holiday and came across this thing. You see, he had quite a bit of free time on his hands because his princess may or may not have angered the wrong people. But to be honest, it wasn't really her fault that she was born so pretty. And now that poor girl's been sleeping for what feels like 1,000 years. Anyway, I digress. Apparently, this is how some people in future kingdoms get around if walking is a bit difficult. You sit yourself in the wooden seat and move yourself around with the big wheels. Don't remember the name though. Probably a miniature, portable, individually powered carriage? But what about... No more questions. I've got your address, your miniature, portable, individually powered carriage, and there's even a horse-drawn carriage outside, which I made out of a pumpkin. A pumpkin! So, trust me, there is nothing left to worry about." "My stepmother..." "Except that. Hold on." The fairy whizzed around Cinderella once again, sprinkling the dust once more. "There, a bit of fairy magic to make sure that she doesn't recognize you. But please do remember that this spell ends at midnight. When that clock strikes 12, everything goes bye-bye. So it's best to be home before that happens. Okay?" So Cinderella went, and just as her carriage was about to set off, "Wait!" The fairy flew into the carriage. "Look at your hands, dear." Cinderella looked down and saw her hands were dark and muddy. "It's fine. I'll wash them later." "I've got a better idea." The small fairy dashed around Cinderella once again, and on her hands appeared a pair of beautiful white silk gloves. They're magic, you see, so never get dirty. Cool, huh? Thank you, Cinderella said. Just go. The palace awaits. Arriving at the palace, Cinderella was in awe of the palace's beauty and its many, many, many steps. But thankfully, after suspiciously eyeing her wheeled contraption, some very gentlemanlike palace guards helped her reach the magnificent ballroom. All eyes fell on her as she entered, including her stepmother and stepsisters, and everyone wondered who this mysterious princess was. Now, while all this was happening, the prince was in a heated argument with the king. But I don't want to marry someone just because I have to. I want to marry someone because I want to be with them. Because I love them, the prince yelled. A fool's dream, the king retorted. As prince of this kingdom, it is your duty to marry someone, a maiden that can bring the nation together and make its people stronger. We don't get to marry for love. No, I have put this party together so that you can finally choose someone to marry. Every noble family from all the kingdoms have come here today, and you will pick one of their daughters to be your bride. And if I do not, the prince asked, then I'll pick one for you. The prince stormed off, running through the castle and past all the faces that wanted something, everything from him, and into the castle gardens. The gardens were surprisingly bare, considering that it belonged to a royal family, but around its edges was a tall, thick green hedge. The prince had discovered in his younger days that one of the hedge walls had a gap in it that he could just about squeeze through, and it became the perfect hiding place. So now as he approached the garden hedge and shimmied himself through the tiny gap, he walked around the edges of his garden, and for a little while he got to pretend that he was not a prince. Are you sure we haven't met before? Cinderella was facing her stepmother and stepsisters, using every muscle in her face to stop herself from laughing at their confused expressions. Certainly, Cinderella said. I mean, if we are being honest, it's a miracle that even let someone like me attend the ball at all. You would think there would be some form of abomination to even think about letting me through the gates. They stared back at her with startled expressions, not quite knowing how to respond to that. But Cinderella let out a small, warm, angelic laugh, and they quickly followed suit, with a sound that was not so warm and definitely not angelic. Now, if you'll excuse me, Cinderella said, I need to get some fresh air. Cinderella wheeled herself out of the castle and into the gardens, laughing quietly to herself at her luck, and thanking the heavens for showing mercy on her for just one night. She wandered over to the hedge surrounding the gardens, examining the beautiful flowers embedded within its leaves, and that's when she heard it. The sound of loud, angry footsteps coming from beyond the hedge. Who is it? Cinderella asked. The footsteps stopped. I know you're there. Announce yourself, or I'll call the guards, she said, attempting to sound tough. Please don't, the voice cried. Then who are you? She asked. I am the gardener. And does this gardener have a name? No. Okay, Mr. Gardener, who does not have a name, tell me a joke. You want me to what? Tell me a joke. My mother always said, only good men can make women laugh, and right now I'm still deciding whether I can trust you. Cinderella could sense the man beyond the hedge was pondering what to do, and just as she was about to call for a guard, he said, Did you hear about why the last gardener quit? No, Cinderella responded. Why did the last gardener quit? His salary wasn't high enough. Silence fell between the pair, until Cinderella let out the biggest laugh. A laugh so big and warm and genuine that it filled the empty gardens and the prince's heart. It was in that moment that he fell in love with her. That was absolutely terrible, Cinderella said, still chuckling to herself. That was my best joke, I'll have you know, he said. It's very topical to my job as a A gardener, Cinderella finished. Yes, a gardener, he said, a bit too quickly. Well, Mr. Gardener, who has no name and can only tell terrible jokes, allow me to enlighten you on what a good joke actually sounds like. And for the rest of the night, Cinderella and the prince shared jokes and stories through the garden hedge, each never figuring out who the other was. However, quicker than she hoped, the clock struck 12, and Cinderella knew she needed to leave. She apologized profusely as she quickly wheeled herself away from the prince and back to her carriage. But on her way, one of her gloves slipped off her hand and fell. She made it home just in time, and her dress returned to rags, her carriage a pumpkin, and one glove remained along with her chair. A gift, my dear, Cinderella could hear faintly, and she thanked the fairy godmother for her kindness. She hid her things in a cupboard and treasured the night in her heart.